morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Manning Moore.
And I'm Trey Ram. Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Fresh Creatives podcast. We're happy that you guys are joining us today. We've got an amazing accountability corner lined up for you, some of the work Manning and I have been doing over the past week. And then a awesome tip of the week where we'll be showing you how to do custom normals for video games. Finally, we'll be talking about working in teams as our discussion topic, and then a great resource roundup with some cool updates from the field of 3D. So without further ado, we'll hop right into it. This is a scene that I've been working on for a school project. So again, I'm continuing this project that I showed the last week. At the moment, this is where it stands. So I've kind of created some trees, which, to be honest, I want to recreate. I don't think they're very nice. And then you can see I've sort of modeled the bus stop in the center here, and been working a little bit on some of the outside details. So it's going well. I still have a lot of things that I want to kind of figure out on the model, particularly these trees. I don't think they're that interesting. I don't think they're particularly well made. So I need to go back and look at references to see if I can try and replicate the feeling of kind of miniature trees and the way that those are created by modelers and stuff. And hopefully by doing that, I'll be able to really sell the vibe of this scene being a diorama. But that's proving to be a challenge. However, it's one that I've enjoyed, honestly. It's kind of weird creating a 3D representation of somebody's miniature representation of a real object.
Little inception right there.
Yeah, it's like 3 layers of modeling inception.
Can you zoom in on the road? I want to look at the detail that you have there. Okay, explain to me how you did the footsteps and the tire tracks, because that looks beautiful.
So I found this great tutorial by Blender Guru about how to create snow in cycles. I basically took that tutorial and turned it into a tutorial on how to make cool snow for a real-time scene. So what I did is essentially painted a height map in Blender using some brushes, or not in Blender, in Photoshop using some brushes. And then I put that onto a really high poly plane. Like my plane was like 7 million triangles or something. Ooh. And then I just took that into Substance Painter. I did some baking for all the maps and stuff, created a couple of like base materials, and then just kind of blended them all together. So you can see here it's really low poly, right?
You're right.
But it's got a lot of that detail, and at a distance looks really nice and sort of sells the effect of it being a, I don't know, snowy road.
That looks beautiful, man. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I like how that part turned out.
Yeah.
I think it looks nice. I used a similar effect down here, but it's not quite as striking because it's much simpler.
Sure. Yeah, I think you did a great job. That looks really good. And a huge step up from last week. Not saying last week was bad, but there's a definite progress that is seen right here.
Yeah, and I need to get to work on it because I have 2 weeks to finish this before it's due. So
Nice.
Just gonna keep working on it, trying to make it look good, and hopefully something will come out at the end.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, let me go ahead and show you what I'm working on.
I'm ready to see it. What you got?
So I decided this week to look into Nuke. Nuke is the industry standard compositor for visual effects. Pretty much, it's Nuke and Flame, but I like Nuke. And I don't really use Nuke at work, and so I kind of have to take it into my own, personal time to learn this program. And so I found a really great tutorial from CG Academy on YouTube that talked about basically getting really nice reflections all inside of your compositor, so in Nuke. So this was the plate that I grabbed. It was for free on Pexels. It was pretty simple. I'm pretty sure whoever shot this did some post smoothing to smooth out the movement of the camera, and that has messed with the camera tracking. But I'll just work with that. So I tracked the scene. I did some basic projection mapping, so this looks a bit confusing. So I have a cube right here, cube right there, cube right there, ground plane right here. If I can just select it. and the back plate all the way back there. And the idea of that is just to get accurate reflections of the scene onto this main sphere. And then I just added a HDRI from HDRI Haven, and that's what's wrapped around the whole scene. So after doing that and inputting the sphere, I can get a render of a sphere right here. And then now
with awesome reflection.
Yes, of the with all the real reflections in there. And so now all I needed to do was to add some ambient occlusion, and you can do that by just copying and pasting the ground plane and the sphere, adding an ambient occlusion node, and then merging it all together to get this.
That looks awesome, honestly.
It looks pretty real. Now, I haven't done all the final compositing touches because it probably needs more sharpness, and it looks funky with the camera tracking because the camera tracking was smooth, but like the idea and the concepts were all there, and it was pretty easy to wrap my head around it, which is really nice. So, yeah, it was a fun little project to do. I really want to keep moving in Nuke. The only problem is that it's really expensive, and so I'm limited to the free version. But it's still nice to dive in and get to know this stuff.
I mean, at the very least, what you can do is start wrapping your head around node-based compositing, which is probably the hardest thing when it comes to learning how to do this stuff, because it's a massive paradigm shift from having to think about
layers and After Effects.
Layer-based compositing.
Yeah,
like something like After Effects.
Yeah, and I've been working in Fusion a lot, so I get the whole node compositing thing. It's just what nodes do in Nuke that's different from Fusion, and it's a lot because Nuke is a much more competent compositor than Fusion.
Mm-hmm.
But the very least, I have my head wrapped around node compositing, so that's good.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and move into the tip of the week. Trey, I understand you have a super cool tip of the week for us.
I do. So today's tip of the week is related to games and foliage. So when you create foliage for games, one problem that you have is your normals on your planes don't look very good. So here you can see the shading is extremely uneven based on the direction of the planes. So we're going to fix this by transferring normals from one mesh to another. In Blender, this is really easy. So the first thing you want to do is a sphere, and kind of scale it up so we can see it. Whenever you're doing this, you want to make sure you always have the sphere as your base object. You could scale it to kind of wrap around the leaves of your tree, but you should always be a sphere. So go ahead and set it to be shade smooth by right-clicking on the object. And then we want to go to our object that we're going to be transferring the normals to. Go to the modifier tab, and then add the modifier data transfer. Once we've done that, we want to select the sphere that we created as our source. And then we can go ahead and hide this now because we don't need it. So you can see that nothing's changed. What we need to add is normal data. So to do that, we go to face corner data, select custom normals, and then we change the mapping to nearest corner of nearest face. And then you'll see that this node tells us we need to enable auto smooth in the object data properties. So we'll go ahead and do that. Go to object data, normals, and auto smooth. And instantly you can see that the shading is much more even on the objects, right? So if I go here, that's what it looks like with our modifier applied, and that's what it looks like without. So it's already much smoother, and if you put this into a game engine, you're going to get proper lighting from your sun or whatever other lights are going to be on it, purely based on this effect. And it's something I didn't know about for a really long time, but once I had learned this, I was like, whoa, that is absolutely crazy.
That's really cool.
We can view the normals really quickly if we go into our edit mode. So here's what it looks like whenever we don't have the modifier applied. But if we go ahead and apply the modifier, you can see that now the normals are all pointing outwards in the shape of a sphere. And that's what you want whenever you're creating foliage. So now what we could do maybe is like copy this around a lot or whatever, and end up creating a kind of bush or something, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe rotate it. And then you could also, if you wanted to, kind of go through and maybe do this process again for this entire bush, which would also increase make it a little bit more smooth. So that's my very short, very quick tip of the week. But if you're ever creating foliage for games, this is a step that you have to take. Otherwise, your foliage is always going to look wrong.
That is incredibly useful. I mean, that could go further than just games. I mean, I could see that being used in film. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that you can edit your vertex normals to do a lot for your mesh.
Yeah.
I mean, weighted normals is a really big thing in modeling to essentially get bevels for almost free. And all it is requiring editing of your surface normals.
That's beautiful, man. Very well done.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go
All right,
ahead.
shall we go into the main topic today?
Yeah, let's dive into that. So our main topic is working in a team. So just as a little background, I work at a very small studio. We have about 5 people there. And so the team is really small. But there has not been a project where I have worked individually on something, really. And I'm saying this, our lead artist listens to this, so I'm going to try and get things as accurate as possible. There's not really many times where I work on a single project alone. There's been times where I do individual shots on my own. I do specific models for a larger project on my own, but we don't do like, hey, Manny, you're going to head up this project all by yourself. So I've been working in a team for, I don't know, almost a year and a half now. And honestly, my experience has been great. And I think it's a lot due to the mentality that you have regarding teams. So yeah. I'm a very big people person. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. I love talking to people. So that is a huge thing on my side whenever we go into the topic of working on a team, because I view myself as a team person, and that gives me certain advantages. Now, whenever the time comes where I'm working alone, whether that's doing freelance, whether it's doing whatever, it's gonna hurt me. So it's really kind of a discussion on working in a team or working on your own. And I know for certain I work much better in a team than I do alone. What about you, Trey?
Well, I think the big thing to remember is in your entire life, there's going to be almost no project that you're going to be working alone on. You're always, most of the time, going to be working with somebody, unless you're maybe a really high-level freelance illustrator or something, I don't know. But for me, it's the exact same way. I mean, when I'm making video games, there are extremely few video games that get made alone. It's just really not possible because there's so much that has to be done. And you have to learn to work with other people. Sometimes they might be people you don't even really like. That's one thing I love about my university, is that every semester we have about 2 months where there's no lectures, no exams, nothing like that. You only work on a project with a team that you form from the people in your semester. And this is such an amazing learning experience because you're working with people and they're not always the kind of people that you want to work with. Last semester, I worked with a couple of people and they're good workers. They do good work, but our personalities didn't quite mesh, right? And sometimes that's difficult for people, but you have to learn how to do that because you're not always going to be able to pick who you work with. So making the most of those relationships and trying to understand where the flaws in communication could be, or where you have problems with the other person, and finding a way to work through those for the betterment of the project it can be a hard skill sometimes, I think. But an absolutely necessary one. And I always find it difficult to work with people that are unwilling to compromise or really listen to other ideas. In a team, you really need to be able to talk to other people candidly and give them your feedback, give them your ideas, and they need to be able to speak candidly back to you, giving their thoughts on those. But you can't really do this in a condescending way or a way that tries to put people down for their ideas. It's so easy to do, completely accidentally. I've done it many times in the past. And you have to understand that that is kind of a tendency maybe that you have. And it requires a lot of self-awareness as well. Something that might be easy to forget about, because it's all about working with other people. But you got to understand yourself in a team environment to know, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I remember there was a couple incidents that happened at work where there was a guy that, we had to be very, we had to do a lot of adjusting because the project that we had was not one that we've ever dealt with before. And so a big thing going into it was, okay, we need to be flexible. We need to adjust because our workflow is going to be changing in the middle of the entire thing. So we need to just, be calm, be ready to change things. And if it needs to be done, we need to be ready to redo things in a new way. And so that was understood. I felt that was understood. And there were some instances where one of the other artists just was not willing to change his mind on things. He wasn't willing to adjust. He wasn't willing to just take things from a different perspective. And it ultimately did not work well. And it's such an important thing to not get your mind, not get your ego in the way of progress for a project. As artists, a lot of us can think that we are better than everyone else in the room, and you know what? You just might be, and that's okay. But letting your ego get ahead of what is happening in that project or whatever's happening at that point, it's going to derail the team, whatever your team is, and you'll have division in your team, and everyone knows working with divided people is not good. So set your ego aside. I think that's one. If you're a person that has a big personality, maybe have a big head, maybe have a big ego, set that aside, because ultimately at the end of the day, your project needs to get done. And it can either be done in a calm, chill, and effortless way, or you can have a lot of backlash, you can have a lot of tension, a lot of butting heads, and it turns the project into a complete nightmare. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened with my incident. I think everything ended up working out great.
I have experienced sort of the same feeling. So I do a lot of Fallout modding in my free time, working on projects like Fallout Miami and some other ones. And these are environments where the ego and it really plays a big role. And I think you often get a lot of people joining these projects that they're not particularly good at working in teams. And it can cause problems. It's easy for people to forget that everybody's here to work on one thing, and that's the project. Ultimately, that's what the goal is, to finish the project and to make it good, right? And sometimes that requires you to say, well, my idea was not good and needs to change, or figuring out how to stand up for an idea that you think is going to work without being a dictator or causing massive rifts in the project. And then the other thing is, if you do have these conflicts, and they're going to happen, it's absolutely impossible to be in a team with zero conflicts, I think. You might have some kind of honeymoon period at the start where it goes really smoothly, but ultimately you're always going to have conflicts. And having the self-awareness and emotional intelligence to deal with these conflicts in a respectful way and just saying, hey, we need to talk about this. This is a thing that happened. It's obviously causing problems in the team emotionally, and that's not good for the project as a whole. So what's going on? What are some things we can work on? Like, let's just talk about it. And I think if you do that and you really sort of stay on top of that and you figure out what are the reasons behind people's opinions, I think you can learn a lot. And sometimes it might not even be what you expect, right? But it's all about taking that time to sit down and talk about it, to work through these things, because the last thing anybody wants is to work in a toxic environment. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah. And then there will be times where, like, your boss is one of these big-headed ego maniacs that makes the entire project just a living hell. That's going to happen, right? Eventually it's going to happen. And what can you do in that situation to make either things more bearable or to help the rest of the team, right? Because, if one person views this guy as having a big head and just completely, being a dictator throughout the project, more often than not, other people on the team are going to view that. So what can you do to help your team, help the boss, help everyone just kind of push through and endure? What do you think?
I'm not sure. I haven't experienced that directly. Well, that's not true. I experienced it with a project that I was working on in the Fallout community, and it got to the point where I said, you know what, this isn't the kind of work environment I want to be in, so I left the project. And maybe sometimes that is a decision you have to make. I mean, there are things that sometimes you're not able to change no matter how good you are at working in a team. And changes have to be made. People need to be fired. You need to leave. You need to make massive organizational shifts. But this sort of makes me think of something I've learned a lot in Germany. It's like the difference between direct and indirect communication. And as Americans, we have a very indirect way of communication. We use a lot of feeling words like I think, in my opinion. And I think this is something that can help smooth out communication a lot of times, because I'm not saying something that sounds like a fact. I'm saying something that sounds like an opinion. But if you work with people like Germans or Russians, from my experience, they tend to be much more direct in their communication. And if you have somebody that's very direct, occasionally that can be difficult to work with, because it sounds like they're not willing to give up any ground, but that's not true. That's just how they communicate. So you have to think about how the other person thinks and talks about things as well, to try and figure out how they're communicating and best work around that, which can be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I think it ultimately comes down to, do your work, do it to the best of your ability, and if at the end of whatever big project you're working on, you know that things are not gonna get better, and you do not want to be in that work environment, then there's no reason why you can't leave. It's important to keep check of yourself, of your own mental state, and make sure that you're being healthy. I mean, there just a couple weeks ago, there was a guy at the mill in Montreal who committed suicide, and he attributed all of it due to a toxic work environment, 80 plus hour work weeks, and a contract saying that if you leave in the middle of a project, you are liable to give the company $36,000, and it just loomed.
What?
Yeah, it was bad. It loomed over his head, and ultimately he thought the best decision was to take his life. And it I was very angry reading that for
That's disgusting.
For a couple of days.
Like,
yeah, it's bad. And you know, it's sometimes, and it's a terrible, horrible thing, but sometimes it takes something like that for someone to realize just how important it is to make sure you're happy at work, to make sure that you are mentally okay at work, because you know, working in teams is intense all the time, but working in teams and, you know, maintaining a level of happiness within the project, within the team, it's another step. And it's, in my opinion, that's even more important. I love my coworkers. I view them as family. I think they're absolutely incredible people, and I am incredibly blessed to be on a team like this. And I know it's not going to be like that my entire life, which is a little sad to think about. But I can always look back at this time and think, you know, this is how it should be. Teams should work like this: mutual respect, mutual love for each other, and just a drive to push a project to be better. It's an experience that I'm going to take forever, and I am so incredibly blessed to have it. But it's important that everyone has that kind of an experience, that working in a team is not a headache, that it's not hell. It's good. It can be good. It's important for everyone to have something like that.
Yeah. And I think one thing that can really help with that is trying to build relationships with the people you're working with. This is not to say that you have to be friends with them, right?
Right.
Not at all. But getting to know them a little bit about outside of what you're doing, right? And maybe understanding a little bit of what's going on in their life, or what their hobbies are, interests are, and being able to talk to them in a way that's not, hey, yeah, you need to do this, you know, like only ever talking to them about what they need to do. I find personally to be a little draining. And it's nice to be able to just talk to somebody and be like, you know, hey, how was your weekend, whatever. And these relationships, I find the better they are for me, the easier it is to work in a team. I'm working on a game right now with some people, and we're all, you know, somewhat good friends out of the work. We're not best friends or anything, but you know, we hang out occasionally. We want to do stuff together, and that helps inside the team as well. We feel more comfortable with each other. We feel more willing to be open to each other and maybe discuss problems that we're having, or be a part, offer ideas, offer feedback. And that's been really valuable for the project as a whole, because it allows us to be in a positive work environment and work our best and be motivated for the people we're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think big thing to take away with this is, you know, at some point in your life, you're going to work in a team. If not, you know, already you are in one, or you have worked in one before. And
if you're not working in a team at some point in your life, you're living on a mountain in Nepal.
Yeah. And, you know, it's do your part to make sure things run smoothly. Don't sacrifice yourself to make things run smoothly, but do your part to help to make things better for the team. And, you know, a little bit of understanding, a little bit of thinking about another person can go a long way.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, you deserve to be happy at work. You deserve to enjoy your work. If you're an artist, if you're in an artistic field, you deserve to enjoy your work, you know? So just keep that in mind, because it's incredibly important to feel like you're appreciated in a team. And, you know, for the guy at the mill in Montreal, it's an incredibly sad,
tragic
thing.
situation.
Tragic and sad. And it's not something anyone wants to have happen. It really isn't.
No.
So,
there's no job in the world that is worth your mental health in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, look after yourself. That's an important thing. Okay, well, this discussion got a little heavy towards the end.
It did. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and it's important to talk about some heavy topics. I think so.
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to discuss some of it. So let's go ahead and wrap up this episode with some resources. We've got some really, really cool things that happened this past week. Let's go ahead and see. Facebook has joined the developer fund for Blender. How crazy is that?
That's fantastic.
That's a really good thing. Facebook being one of the biggest companies in the world, supporting one of the greatest open source projects in the world, it's a lovely thing. It really is. And if anyone is curious about this, Todd Rosendahl put out on Twitter a beautiful statement. Let me find it. This was how I found out that it happened. He said, is this too far back? I follow Todd on Instagram. Not Instagram, on Twitter. Okay, I can't see it. Anyway, basically he says, this is great news for Blender. It's big, and Facebook will not change the course of what Blender is doing, which is remaining a free open source project, which is a big thing if you know anything about Facebook, right? So yes. It's a great thing that Facebook is supporting the development of Blender, and in a greater way, they're not going to mess with what Blender is, and I love that. I have my own little things against Facebook, but whatever. Let's see, another really cool news. Epic Games invests in side effects. Look at that. They are now a minority investor in side effects. If you guys know what side effects does, they create Houdini. That is like their big rise to fame. Houdini, the famous simulation and procedural systems program. It's awesome. More money to them because they deserve so much for what they've done.
They're developing an amazing program. What you can do with it is absolutely insane.
Yeah. For what they've done for movies and video games, it is an amazing thing. So go side effects. Thank you, Epic Games, for supporting them. That's really good. That's awesome. Another thing, we have a super cool video from Clint Jones, and if any of you guys know him, he works for Corridor Digital, or I guess it's just Corridor now. He works for Corridor, and he had asked a whole bunch of artists to continue in this walk animation that he set up, and there's 125 different unique versions of this walk thing, and it's beautiful. Some of the stuff that's created here is awesome. And so it's a really cool project. Please watch it, support it. It's beautiful. It was really cool to see. Really glad that got
I'll have to check this out.
Created.
This looks super interesting.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Let's see. Red Giant, small update. Red Giant updated to Trap Code Suite 16. Universe got an update. Magic Bullet got an update. All this stuff. So that's cool. If you're a fan of Red Giant products, do your update or whatever. It's good. They always make really good stuff. And the last thing, I'm really excited about this one. I joined the live stream for this because it was so freaking cool. David Ariev. Yes, it's a V, but you pronounce it Ariev. He is creating a class with School of Motion, and it's called Lights, Camera, Render. And it's basically his course diving into creating a sci-fi scene in Cinema 4D with Octane. And if any of you guys know anything about David Ariev, he is amazing. He's known as Octane Jesus because he has just such a beautiful, beautiful, luscious hair. And so it dives into not just creating scenes in Cinema 4D and Octane. It dives into creating beautifully composed shots. In animation, it dives into property or like concepts in cinematography and lighting and all this stuff, and it's really beautiful. So if you guys are interested in an amazing course, and I know this one's going to be amazing, I highly recommend it. Yes, they're going to use Cinema 4D and Octane. If you just want to use Blender, that works. If you want to use Maya, 3ds Max, whatever, I'm sure it can work for you. And then you get like thousands of assets, like all the ships, all the models. You get that included in the course. All the textures, all that stuff. It's all included. Here we go, over 1,000 assets, 25 hours of video, and then you get you get like a mentor thing with it. So it's really cool. If you're interested, I recommend checking it out. It's gonna be kind of expensive, so if it works in your budget, then great. But it's something to look at. It's really cool. I recommend it.
If you ask me, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Let's see. I think that pretty much wraps up our episode. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Yeah, it's another fun episode.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for everybody that's watched this far. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more episodes, make sure to subscribe and like. You can also hit the bell notification in order to get notified whenever we upload a new video. We currently upload every Tuesday at noon CST.
Is it
Make
noon?
sure to check out the channel then.
I thought I was doing it at 10:30. Could be noon. I can.
Oh, are you?
I don't think so. Noon. Just check it out noon around lunchtime. It will be up. So thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope you guys are enjoying the show. If you have any comments, any questions, anything, if you have discussion topic questions that you want us to talk about, please leave that in the comments. We're having a really good time making this for you guys, and as far as we know, we're gonna keep doing it for a while. So thank you again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and goodbye.